Subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon to get the latest updates.
The mood is a bit somber today, and you know what? I can't even cheer myself up with the news of the Indian hockey team making a dramatic recovery after that 7-1 routing by the Australians to beat Spain 3-0 and keep its chances of going to quarterfinals very much alive. But even that is no compensation for the story that's come out of the Northeast where Indian has killed Indian. Now you might say that what's the big deal? We have riots, Indians kill Indians quite often. So what is so special here? What is so special here is uniformed Indians have killed uniformed Indians. It is the state police forces of two sensitive border states who fought each other, resulting in the death of 5 or 6. We are still looking for confirmation of the police persons of one state. And scores have been injured, and both states' chief ministers have been issuing statements. Both police chiefs have been issuing statements. District administrations have been issuing statements as if India and Pakistan have had a skirmish on the LOC, or as if India and China have had a skirmish on the LOC. This is a national shame in 2021. It is also a national shame because this is a situation where one party, that is the BJP, controls all of the Northeast, it dominates it fully, sweeps it and takes great pride in it. It doesn't rule every state in the Northeast, but it rules the crucial states, plus all the other states are co-opted by it in the NDA, that is National Democratic Alliance. Also, to bring these chief ministers of northeastern states together, the BJP has also set up what is called as NEDA, that is Northeastern Development Alliance. In spite of that, police forces, armed police forces of two states have fought pitched battles on their borders. And you see the statements. Statement from Himanta Biswa Sarma, Assam Chief Minister, saying, I am posting 4,000 commandos on the border. We will protect the constitutional boundaries of our state. Mizoram saying the same thing. Mizoram saying, you take your police forces back or we can't restrain our civilians. They don't say the police. At the same time, Mizoram police at top levels has issued a statement which does not deny that they opened fire, that did open fire. If you see those videos, does look like an automatic was used, probably an LMG was used, as the Assam police has alleged. Then both chief ministers, Zoramthanga of Mizoram and Himanta Biswa Sarma of Assam, they wrote tweets yesterday tagging Home Minister Amit Shah, basically saying, Uncle, please come and help us. Now, this is unheard of, at least for two generations of Indians. Those of my generation can go back and tell you stories about the past. That 1979, there was a big massacre from the Naga side of the Assamese villagers in their border areas because they have a border dispute. In 1985, again, there was a big Naga raid on a village called Mirapani. The market was burnt and nearly 42 people were killed, all on the Assam side. 30 of them were Assam policemen. So once again, they were the Assam policemen. But that was 1985. In fact, I had gone to cover that story to Mirapani for India Today, and I'll share that link with you. I will also share a screenshot with you. Now, to think that the same thing can happen 36 years later, and that too between Assam and Mizoram, the tiniest state in the region. And for this to happen when the same party and alliance is ruling everything, although mind you, even in 1985, it was the Congress party that was ruling both Nagaland. In fact, S.C. Jamir, who was popularly called as Chubatoshi, S. Chubatoshi Jamir, later became governor of Maharashtra, and Hiteshwar Saikia was the Assam chief minister. So, but this is 2021, such a thing happening, nobody could have imagined. Now, I will tell you a bit about the roots of this problem and why does this keep coming up every now and then. It is just that we've now had a sizable problem. There was one more before that between Assam and Nagaland in 2014. Again, a bunch of people were killed, but Assam-Nagaland is a more familiar problem. In any case, all these are problems that have common roots. And I will come into that and give you some detail of how these northeastern states came into being and why these legacy issues now persist. Also, let me warn you that today, in this episode of Cut the Clutter, I will pepper it with a fair bit of opinion, partly because I feel very passionately about the Northeast, partly because I lived there for 3 years to cover the region, then for Indian Express between 1981 and 83, at the height of trouble, when 4 insurgencies were on. Assam was completely blockaded to such an extent that even the crude oil produced from Assam's oil fields could not be transported by the pipeline to the refinery at Barauni. So this was that complete status of dislocation and violence and disorder at that point. And we thought that we had come a long way from that. It was all in the past. The Northeast was now a supremely peaceful region, which, by the way, it mostly is. We keep hearing about the insurgency in Nagaland, but it's a joke about Nagaland that you are perfectly safe on the streets of Nagaland, whatever you might say about insurgents, even walking at night, as long as you are not sober. So that, as you can see, is a joke. So what happened suddenly in this situation? First of all, try and understand how did the states came into being. It was initially all Assam. Tripura was one territory, Manipur was one territory. These were both union territories. The rest was all Assam. So what is Nagaland? Nagaland was the first state to break out of Assam in 1963. In 1957, a couple of years after Naga insurgency began and then caught fuel in a big way. In 1957, to empower the Nagas, the Nehru government created an autonomous sort of state within a state for the Nagas, but it was still part of Assam. It was a Naga Hills district. 1963, it became a state because the idea was that Nagas, a tiny minority of many minorities, because Nagas, as we explained to you earlier, is almost a 30 tribes amongst themselves. So, a tiny minority of many tinier minorities felt that they were not getting a share of power under a big large state, Assam. And how different that is, what is the difference in size and dimensions, I will come to that in a couple of minutes. So then Nagaland was created in 1963. And as Nagaland was created, some borders were drawn, and once again these borders were drawn in a hurry because this work was done in a hurry. So for all these tribal states, the question that kept coming up was, you've drawn political boundaries, but what about our traditional boundaries? Which means my tribe used to go there. My tribal cousins live in such and such place. That's why the Nagas keep saying, I want Nagalim, which integrates all the Naga inhabited areas of adjoining states, even Myanmar, into my new Nagaland or Nagalim, the Naga homeland. That is the demand of the NSCN. So, in the Northeast, tradition and modernity always clash. And don't confuse tradition with something old-fashioned, passe, boring, superstition, nothing. For tribal societies, tradition is a very important thing and they hold it very close to their hearts. Now, even when Nagaland was being set up, there was a concern that what will happen to Nagaland? It does not have a railhead, it doesn't have an airport because it doesn't have any flat areas. So Nagaland was given the tiny city then of Dimapur, which is now the busiest commercial city in that entire northeastern region. Dimapur actually could have been with Assam because Dimapur, as the name indicates, it was inhabited, the region is inhabited by Dimasa Kacharis, who are a tribe or a bunch of tribes in Assam. So a lot of the Dimasa Kacharis now think that, see, my Dimapur was given away to Nagaland. So a lot of these adjustments were made and everything has left side effects. For example, there is a big reserve forest area between Nagaland and Assam, more than 400 kilometers. On both sides, there is a reserve forest. Much more of it is on the Assam side because reserve forest is in the plains. Now that reserve forest was a very lucrative area. It still is, but the plywood companies moved in big, huge trees. In fact, I've seen the trees there. I've traveled there and covered that story very closely. And you can see trees which have been cut where the stem was so wide that you would find BSF officers putting a dining table there and hosting 12 people for tea, or people telling you that, look, I just, there were slices of the stems of these trees from which you could make in single piece a dining table for 8, 10, 12, like that. So a lot of that forest wealth has been cut, mostly illegally. Why? Because both sides keep fighting in terms of who it belongs to. Whoever goes and controls it locally can make a deal with those plywood factories, or could make a deal, because those factories are nearly finished now, because those trees are finished. These are reserve forests only in name. And that's where a lot of fighting has been taken place. 1979, there were more than 50 massacred. 1985, as I told you, more than 40 massacred. But the fight is always about reserve forest for whatever is left. And now what is left there, because big trees are all gone, what is left there is flat land, and flat land has value. And it is somewhere next to that Nagaland has also found some signs of oil reserves. And Nagaland has had a complex history. Nagaland, when they signed the peace accord in Shillong, they also wanted some kind of a control over the natural wealth found in their state. So under Article 371 of the Constitution, a special dispensation was created. So they weren't letting ONGC prospect for oil there. Now that is an ongoing problem between Assam and Nagaland. Then there is a problem between Mizoram and Nagaland. And I will tell you what happened with Mizoram and Nagaland. This piece of real estate, look at the map of Assam. Map of Assam, there is Assam a bit like that, right? And you hold it like this. So it comes in a little bit south and west like this. What comes in south and west like this ends up in the Kachar region. It has some hill districts, tribal hill districts, Karbi Anglong, North Kachar Hills, etc. But the rest is Kachar district. This is mostly inhabited by Bengalis. A lot of them immigrants from East Pakistan or Bangladesh. That's why demographics of Kachar and Brahmaputra Valley, that is Kachar Valley, which is called Barak Valley, and Brahmaputra Valley is completely different. If you look at this little district or this little region or this panhandle of Kachar, see how sensitively is it located. Because this district, just one district, borders Manipur, it borders Mizoram, it borders Bangladesh near Karimganj, it also borders Tripura, and it is the gateway to all these states through Assam. So for example, if you are driving from Delhi to Aizawl in Mizoram, then you will first go to Guwahati. From Guwahati, you will go to Silchar. From Silchar, reaching Silchar in Kachar, you will take a turn through Hailakani district, then go into Mizoram. So the point where you enter Mizoram, see it on the map, is a place called Vairengte. Why it's called Vairengte, I don't know for sure, but I have a guess, because in Mizo language, Vai is an outsider, non-tribal. It's not a term that used very flatteringly, but it's also literally the meaning of outsider. So maybe it's a place where traditionally people thought that from where outsiders come in. Now Vairengte is the gateway to Mizoram. That is where this fighting is taken place. So from the Mizoram side, the district is Kolasib, which if you are driving from say Silchar to Aizawl is the halfway point where you usually make a stop for chai, etc. Whereas the territory of Kachar, which is in question here, is from the Hailakani district. Now, usual, so and so came to my territory, set up a hut. So and so came to my territory, set up a COVID testing hut, etc. So one thing led to another. There was a fighting, and police came in, and there was firing. So this is what happened now. But this is not the only one. Even before that, there have been fights between the population on both sides, sometimes with the police getting involved, but fortunately, we haven't seen any deaths. On 10th of July, an Assam police party which was going towards Vairengte, so the Mizos said, they had come into their territory, they were attacked by some IEDs and explosions were heard far away Fortunately, no major injuries took place, although some injuries did take place. October last year, 2020, there were again clashes between people of the two states. Village Lailapur in Hailakandi district of Kachar and Vairengte of Kolasip district in Mizoram. In fact, Barengte is also a place where if you have any connections with the armed forces, you would have heard the name because Barengte is where the Indian Army set up its counter-insurgency and jungle warfare school. I've been there. It's a marvelous institution and the training there is very tough. So all Indian Army units going into insurgency areas are first trained there and are given their indoctrination in jungle warfare, and a lot of officers and men from overseas forces also come and train there. So Warengte is also a sensitive place. Now Assam's border with Mizoram is 165 kilometers. Once again, go back to the map of the northeast. It's out of original Assam that Nagaland, and I'm giving the sequence in which it was done. Nagaland, then Meghalaya, Mizoram, Arunachal Pradesh were carved out. Tripura and Manipur were already there, but once again the route to reach any of these was via Assam. So Assam is the heart and the spine of the northeast as you see in this map. But while the heart and the spine is Assam or Brahmaputra Valley and then Barak Valley, you also see that the head of the northeast is not in one place because to the east of Assam is Arunachal, right? A little bit to the west of Arunachal then is Bhutan. Look at how complicatedly Assam is positioned. So if you look at Assam's north, there is first of all Bengal towards west and north, a tiny bit of border with Bengal, that is where you enter Assam from Bengal. Then you have Bhutan, then you have all of Arunachal Pradesh to the north and the east. Then it comes into Nagaland, and after that you have Manipur, Mizoram, Tripura, and again Bangladesh. So Assam shares borders with all these. Assam is also where everybody comes for education, medical treatment, etc., etc., etc. Assam is the big brother. I told you just a while back that I will explain to you the difference in the dimensions of the various states and Assam. So just look at the populations. Mizoram has just over 13 lakhs, as I told you, the smallest state in the northeast. Nagaland has 22 lakhs. These are approximations for this year. Arunachal Pradesh, just 14 lakhs. Arunachal Pradesh, in terms of area, would be the 14th largest state in India. It is so large that it's almost as large as Punjab and Haryana combined. In fact, it's just a little behind Bihar and West Bengal. It is so large. So you can see how thinly populated it is. Now, Manipur has 31 lakhs, Tripura is the largest of these other states, has 41 lakhs, and Meghalaya has 34 lakhs. Together, these are 1.55 crores. Assam's population, on the other hand, is 3.5 crores. So even today, Assam is twice as big, more than twice as big in population than all these states combined. And that's why expectation from Assam always is a bit of generosity because you are the big brother. So be helpful like a big brother, but don't play the big brother. Because one thing these states just do not like, these tribal identities simply do not like, is domination either by mainland Indians, that is Delhi. So there is always the Delhi hostility that, Delhi is controlling everything, Delhi is coming in. But locally, it's also about Assam because the reason they all became separate states was that they did not want to be part of Assam and they did not want to be governed from Assam. Now, who saw it? Mrs. Gandhi saw it. Nehru, first of all, made Nagaland into a state because he knew that the Chinese had got very involved with Naga insurgency and he had to do something to assuage or create one political force in the Nagas, which was with the government. So he did that. Mrs. Gandhi, on the other hand, saw problems elsewhere. Just as she took over in 1966, the Mizo insurgency started. In fact, when the Mizo insurgency started in 1966, then Zoramthanga, who's the current Chief Minister of Mizoram, he was with the MNF underground. In fact, he became then secretary to Lal Denga, the founder and leader of MNF, and vice president to him. And in fact, after Laldenga passed away, Zoramthanga took over. So he's somebody who's fought in the underground for many years. He's gone to East Pakistan for refuge and training because they had the sanctuaries there. He's been there, done that. So these people have seen the toughest times, and he's at the other end of Himanta Biswa Sarma, who himself has had his rebellious days, having been in this All Assam Students Union, and also having had fairly close connection with Alpha, although there is no evidence of his having been involved in anything violent at that point. So these people have known how uncertain things can be in the Northeast. So it was in 1969 that Indira Gandhi first created two autonomous states within a state. And these autonomous states were Meghalaya and Arunachal. In 1971, she came up with what is called as Northeastern Areas Reorganization Act. That is what defined these new states. And with that reorganization, union territories of Mizoram and Arunachal Pradesh were created. So they were no longer autonomous regions within Assam. And union territories of Manipur and Tripura were made states. So Mizoram, which was actually originally Lushai Hills and then became autonomous, now became a union territory. Later in 1987, it became a full-fledged state. In the same year, Arunachal became a full-fledged state. Arunachal, you'd remember, was called NEFA before that, Northeastern Frontier Agency. So when did she move this law? She moved this law on 30th December 1917. Why is that so important? Because 16 December 1971, she just finished the Bangladesh war, liberating Bangladesh. And she knew that because India had this northeastern soft underbelly, this was the time to settle that problem. So she declared Arunachal Pradesh to be a state. Let the Chinese do what they want. And the calculation was, if the Chinese did not come in to intervene when India was defeating Pakistan, why would they come in now? So she declared Arunachal Union Territory at that point from that NEFA status, Northeast Frontier Agency status. So integrated it further into India. And similarly, she created these other states, including Mizoram very importantly, because the idea was that local elites there should get their own share of power. And similarly, Meghalaya, before the tribals of Meghalaya, that is Khasis, Jaintias and Garos, there was resentment against the Assamese domination. Also the fact that their main city, Shillong, was the capital of combined Assam. In fact, even when Meghalaya was given its autonomous state status, then central sort of most important areas of Shillong municipality were kept outside of it, a bit like Lutyens Delhi is an NDMC area, not part of Delhi municipal area, so that Assam's capital could remain there. But she knew that these are regional ambitions, and that is how these states were, union territories were created, and later they became states. What happened in the process was that a lot of it was done in a great hurry. And in that great hurry, a lot of history, ethnicity, tribal claims, they were overlooked. For example, if I bring you just back again to Hailakandi Wairengte, what is the problem there? Now, the Mizos say that the British drew the boundaries of Mizoram or Lushai Hills or the Mizo tribal traditional areas in 1875. This was under the Bengal East Frontier Regulation Act, BEFR of 1873. So the British do these boundaries, they say, in consultation with Mizo or Lushai tribal chiefs. So our chief said this is the boundary, British said okay, we will accept that. That is our boundary. Whereas once again in 1933, the British redrew those boundaries. Mizos say when the British redrew those boundaries, they never consulted our chiefs, which is true because the 1875 boundaries were put out in Assam Gazette. Now they say take it back to our traditional boundaries that the British acknowledged in consultation with our chiefs in 1875. Whereas when Government of India drew these states and their maps, they went by the latest maps, and that was 1933. So that is where the problem arises from. Now, one would have thought that with a very strong government in Delhi, very strong Home Minister, complete control over all of the Northeast, such a huge focus in the Northeast. Just last week, the Home Minister was in the Northeast and said, after Modi ji's come, there's complete peace and the place is developing. You would have thought that these problems would have been settled by now. But that has not happened. And that is where I'll give you 1 minute of opinion. One reason it hasn't happened is that the BJP and the RSS, and I have watched RSS leaders very closely working in the Northeast, people like Krishan Gopalji, etc., in those days when we were all young people. And they somehow always had the sense, the RSS and BJP has always had the sense, and before that the Congress, Indira Gandhi also for a long time had that sense, that you have to Indianize the Northeast. They realized in the course of time that Indian identity has to sit on people very easy. So that is the reason I say India should never say unity in diversity. India should say celebrate diversity. And Northeast is a very good example of that, because every tribe, every sub-tribe, every linguistic group has different denominators of identity. It can be ethnicity, it can be language, it can be food, it can be religion, but it is not predominantly religion, and it is not the Hindu-Muslim binary. And that's when the BJP brought in CAA. It was directed at Assam. And what was the purpose of CAA plus NRC? The purpose was that we will identify all those who might not be able to prove their Indian citizenship, and we will settle Hindus among them in this region, and Muslims will be turned out. Now, none of these tribal states want any of that to happen, because they are very insecure and very protective of their ethnic identities. If your population is just 13 lakhs in an area which is almost as big as Punjab and Haryana combined, you worry about every 500 people coming in. And that's the reason many of these states, Nagaland, Mizoram, Arunachal, they have inner line permit restrictions. So they restrict who comes in. And it's after CAA, NRC that Meghalaya has also been demanding this. So that is when I had written a national interest, which I'm sharing with you. And I said, look, with this CAA, NRC, you're lighting up a fire in a region that you won't be able to control. So some of what's happening today is also a result of that lack of understanding of the Northeast, the sensitivities, and also a lack of appreciation of the Northeastern minorities, small groups, not religious minorities. I'm not defining it like that. When I say minorities, ethnic minorities, their own keenness to preserve their ethnic identity. They will not trade that for anything.